Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's PA HMIS Privacy and Security Standards training class. Privacy and security are very important to a system and an environment where personal information is collected, stored, and used. And we hope that this information presented in this training will assist your organization to better secure the client information you collect on a daily basis, or at least be more aware of what the baseline requirements are for security and privacy laid out by HUD. This is the first time that we've held this type of training, and we do plan to hold this training twice a year. Hopefully we'll try to do it about every 6 months. And we do highly recommend that all agencies send at least one staff member once a year so you can, keep brushed up, and we'll add any changes that have been put in there from the previous training class as the mandates are rolled out. A couple minutes before we get into the actual agenda and everything is on your WebEx control panel, there are a couple options I want you guys to be aware of. There is a little question box. It's got a little question mark on it. If at any time during the training you guys have any questions, go ahead and type it in. We'll try to answer it during the training. If not, we will get to it at the end of the training. As well as there's a little kind of chat bubble that you can use. Please don't use that for questions. It's easier for us to track it through the actual question utility. But you can use that if you want to basically let us know if there's someone else there attending the training with you that's not directly registered and you want to get them credit for it, or if you have any technical issues, we'll go ahead and help you out there. We are not going to have any breaks. This is only about 20, 22 slides, so hopefully we'll be done in about a half hour. Then we're going to go straight through it. Then we will open up the phones for a question and answer session at the end. We will be sending out this PowerPoint to everybody that's in attendance, and we hope to have the PowerPoint, and we are recording this training, so we hope to have that up on our website, hopefully within the next week or so. All right, let's go ahead and get started. This is the agenda for the training. We're going to define exactly what privacy versus security mean, both hopefully in official, and hopefully we can give you some layman's terms to go with that. We're going to go over some standard general definitions that we're going to use, and some acronyms that we're going to use heavily throughout the training class. Application, who this is applied to, kind of give you an example of who it applies to. And then the rest of the training is kind of broken up into two areas. We first cover over the privacy responsibilities, especially go heavily into what agencies need to know about their privacy notice and their privacy postings. And then we'll have a second section on security standards, the responsibilities, both from our end as a vendor, as well as what the agencies and the system users of the system's duties are to try to make the system and the client information as secure as possible. Then we'll just kind of finish up with a brief conclusion and give you actually some references where you can do some extra information digging, some learning on your own. Privacy versus security. Privacy, now in a sense, they seem kind of together or the same thing, but they actually have two very different definitions and very different information points. Privacy is the control over the extent, timing, and circumstances of sharing oneself physically, behaviorally, or intellectually with others. So what that basically means is privacy consists of ensuring specific measures are in place when dealing with personal client information, and includes directives on when it's collected, how that information is used, and how that information is shared. So it's all around collecting and using specific information that you've collected. Now, security means that ensuring that data is kept safe from corruption and that access to it is suitably controlled. So security is all about access to actual data, and whether it's electronically based or hard copy, paper based, basically not allowing access to unauthorized personnel. Now, a couple definitions, a couple acronyms that we are going to use very heavily throughout the training. First, we have CHO, which is a covered homeless organization. This is any organization and all employees, volunteers, contractors that records, uses, or processes personal protected personal protected information, basically client information. And that is what we commonly refer to within PA HMIS as an agency, and it includes all associated staff. Now, PPI, personal protected information, this is any information about a homeless client that, 1, identifies a specific individual, 2, can be manipulated so that identification is possible, or 3, can be linked with other available information to identify a specific individual. Any of the following examples fall under the coverage of PPI, or personal protected information. That includes their name, social security number, when they were in a program, those dates, program entry and exit, zip code of last permanent address, the program they're in, as well as the program type. If you collect any of that information, that can be used, if it gets in the wrong hands, to track back and find who that person actually is. So that's why it all falls under that PPI heading. Okay. Who does this apply to? Privacy and security standards applies to all agencies and programs that record, use, or process PPI within the PA HMIS environment. This includes the COC, homeless service providers, PA HMIS staff, and PA HMIS software hosting staff, and any employees, volunteers, affiliates, contractors, and associates who have access to the PA HMIS system or even access to PA HMIS client information. So it's a pretty whole gamut of people. This also means any homeless service provider who does not receive HUD funding, such as faith-based organizations, a city, county, or state agency that is accessing the system or client data, must also adhere to these privacy standards. These security standards and privacy standards apply to all agencies across the board, regardless of funding source. Even though it's kind of a HUD-mandated thing, because they put out the standards for the HMIS, it involves everybody that touches the system. All right, now we're going to go into the privacy part. I'm going to start off with some of the privacy responsibilities. The main privacy standards, and these are some overviews, is to protect client personal information from unauthorized disclosure. It allows for reasonable, responsible data disclosures, and it's derived from principles of fair information practices. Now, privacy is broken up into 6 main components: data collection limitations, data quality, purpose and use limitations, openness, access and correction, and accountability. Now, we're going to go over each of these basic tenets of these privacy components, and a couple of the major points that are embedded throughout the privacy component section is having all client data collection procedures and the process for using and share this collected data explicitly explained and laid out by your agency or your CHO, as well as having these main points openly accessible to all the clients you serve. That's kind of a general theme throughout all of these privacy components. The first two we're going to kind of combine. It's the data collection limitations and data quality. The first two are about data collection. A CHO may collect PPI only when appropriate to the purpose for which the information is obtained or when required by law. Now, PPI must be collected by fair and lawful means. Basically, you collect only what has been previously thought out and planned to collect, and no more, no less. Also, a CHO must post a sign at each intake desk or comparable location that explains generally the reasons for collecting this information. An example consumer notice will be shown at the end of the privacy section to kind of give you an example of what we're talking about when we say privacy postings. Now, as for the data quality portion of it, PPI collected by a CHO must be relevant to the purpose for which it is used and should be accurate, complete, and timely. So all that goes into making sure that the data is accurate as it can be when you're entering into the system, as well as from a hard copy file, and you collect it as timely as you can, as well as make sure it's relevant. So if you're working for certain services, make sure it stays in the scope of the service that you're providing. Purpose and use limitations. CHO must specify in its privacy notice the purposes for which it collects PPI and must describe all uses and disclosures. What are you going to do with that data once you get it? A CHO may disclose or use PPI only if the use or disclosure is allowed by the standard and is described in your own privacy notices. And the use and disclosures not specified explicitly in the privacy notice can only be made with the consent of the individual, and usually we say written consent is always the best and the most true. If there's anything that you're disclosing outside of your planned use of it, or of course when required by law. Openness, this refers to being transparent about all your data collection and what you're using it for and what you're sharing with. A CHO must publish a privacy notice describing its policies and practices for the processing of PPI and provide a copy of its privacy notice to any individual upon request. A CHO must post a sign stating the availability of its privacy notice to any individual who requests a copy. And a CHO must state in its privacy notice that the policy may be amended at any time and that amendments may affect information obtained by the CHO before the date of the change. So it's all about making sure everybody knows what you're doing with this data that you're collecting. Access and correction. In the interest of client access and full disclosure to their own PPI, basically access to their own data that you guys are collecting for themselves, every CHO must allow an individual to inspect and have a copy of any PPI about the individual. This includes access to any electronic data entered into the PA HMIS system, as well as any hard copy files that you've collected and keep on premises. You have to offer to explain any information that the individual may not understand if they have any questions about it. You need to consider any request by an individual for correction of inaccurate or incomplete PPI pertaining to this individual. So you do have to take those matters serious. If someone reviews their data and finds a mistake and asks for any kind of correction, you do need to take the proper steps to ensure that that situation is remedied. Now, another note there, a CHO is not required to remove any information, but may alternatively mark any information as inaccurate or incomplete and then supplement it with additional information. Accountability, this is the final of the 6 privacy components. A CHO must establish a procedure for accepting and considering questions or complaints about its privacy and security policies and practices. A CHO must require each member of its staff, including employees, volunteers, affiliates, contractors, and associates, to sign annually or otherwise a confidential agreement that acknowledges receipt of a copy of the privacy notices and pledges to comply with the privacy notice. Now, much like any person that registers and wants an account with the HMIS system or PA HMIS system, we do need to have a system user agreement that goes over confidentiality and privacy notice information. Every CHO or agency should have something similar, some kind of binding user contract with their own employees, their own agency staff as well. Now, additional accountability actions can also be undertaken by CHO, even though they're not mandatory. They are highly recommended, requiring each staff member to undergo formal training in privacy requirements, as well as establishing a method such as either an internal audit for regular review and compliance with its privacy policy. CHOs can also designate what they call a chief privacy officer to supervise implementation and oversight of their privacy notice and their privacy standards. Basically, accountability is all about checks and balances and making sure that the privacy is taken seriously and always documented and it stays on course. Now, a couple summaries about this. As you pretty much heard, everything, there's a lot in there, was about privacy notices. So in summary, every CSO that collects and uses and shares PPI must have a published privacy notice, and it must be maintained and made available to the general public and meet the following conditions. It must also comply with federal, state, and local confidentiality law. So every agency is in different areas, within different counties or jurisdictions, so you need to make sure that you're up to speed with the specific sharing and collecting laws in your area to make sure it doesn't conflict with your privacy notice. And also a couple recommendations that HUD lays out. It's recommended to have a history of updates recorded for each published version, what they kind of like to call a version control system. So if you do make an update or a new version, you have a little appendix or something that shows when it was updated and any big changes that were made. So anybody that's got an older one or wants to keep track of that can have an easy place to find that new information. Also, it is recommended to post on your website if it's applicable. So it's out to the general public, so everybody knows what your agency's privacy notice includes and all is about. Now, there is additional information. We're not actually going into, all the 7 specific components of your privacy notice, but we're going to show some references at the end and give you some information where you can find some examples and more information on the specific privacy notice, how to put them together, that sort of thing. Also, there's a lot of information in the privacy components about a privacy posting. Now, a privacy posting or consumer notice or sign must be displayed at each intake desk or comparable location that explains at the least the reason for the data collection and the availability of the CHO's privacy notice describing the privacy practices to all consumers that request a copy. So those are the 2 main things it needs to show, right here in the privacy notice, why you're collecting the data that you're collecting, and that you have a privacy notice and its availability. It's available on anytime anybody asks for it. Now, additional information that can be placed on the consumer notice or privacy posting is any additional data sharing disclosures or data collection rules that you may have that you want to disclose, such as giving notice to all clients that any that apply for services by accepting services, they have given implied consent to have their data collected and entered into the HMIS system. That's another way that you can do it as long as it's posted in a generally easily viewable area that is acceptable. Now, note that implied consent for HMIS data collection only covers data within your own organization, within your own CHO, with all the staff members that you have specific privacy agreements with. Any client data that is shared outside of your servicing CHO or outside any of your participating networks of service providers, you must have prior agreements for that data sharing in place and must have specific written consent from that client. It's kind of like when you enter people into the HMIS system, we have that client consent form that is specifically for data sharing outside of your specific agency. And it's going to be very important when we do institute that global sharing coming up hopefully this fall. Now, in the slide is an example of a privacy posting or consumer notice that we have that you can display in your program offices. You can find a copy of this on our website. It's actually, I think, consumer notice or privacy posting on our www.newpa.com/PA-HMIS. It's also, I believe, when we send out the participation agreement that every agency needs to sign prior to going into agreement with HMIS. We do include a copy of that as well. So you can use that as a kind of a template to tailor for your specific CHO's needs. Okay, now we're going to go into the security categories and security itself. PA HMIS, DCD, and CHOs must apply system security provisions to all systems where personal protected information is stored, and this includes but is not limited to the networks, desktops, laptops, mini computers, mainframes, and security for which access and storage of this data is done on. Now, security has 3 basic categories. There's system security, software application security, and hard copy security. Now, most of the requirements in regards to system security fall to the actual HMIS vendor, an entity that handles the software server, which would be us, the PA HMIS team and DCED. But some security and software does need to be performed on the agencies or CHO's end, especially in the form of hard copy security. So in the next couple of slides, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of give you hey, these are what our responsibilities are as the HMIS vendor. And then we're going to cover each of these specific areas and kind of give you an examples of what are the responsibilities on your end for each of these 3 categories. So this is the PA HMIS security. The following list of security items fall under the HMIS vendor software. This is the server and infrastructure team's responsibilities, and while not exclusive to PA HMIS and the DCED team, they are taken care of for the HMIS application. The PA HMIS actual application and server actually is administered by DCD jointly with the Pennsylvania Office of Administration. They deal with all the large network and infrastructure-based security throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and they are in compliance with these following mandates, which would be the virus protection on the actual software, the firewalls that are in place so it only allows authorized access, any kind of disaster recovery and backup. We have a full integrated backup system that runs nightly and weekly in case there's any kind of a disaster, so we don't lose data. Electronic data transmission and electronic data storage is done through our secure SSL transmissions when you are logging into our website, as well as we take care of any kind of system monitoring or disposal, secure disposal of data if any kind of servers need to be replaced. So all these things kind of fall under our jurisdiction. So those things that you don't really need to worry about on your end. Now we're going to kind of go over each of those three categories and kind of explain, well, what are you as an agency or CHO and your specific users responsible for? So the first section is CHO system security, and this kind of goes over your individual computers within your agency or organization, Windows components, as well as Windows-based apps like Outlook and stuff like that. Now, each CHO that works with HMIS, of course, must provide users with workstations and computers throughout the agencies. Now, those workstations should have specific username and passwords that allows for Windows access into each machine. These Windows passwords should be non-generic in nature and should be unique to each password, or should be unique to each workstation. That's always the first line of defense, not getting into the actual application or HMIS application, but actually getting into the computer itself. So, example, please do not have a user log on as, the username is user and no password, or user and 1234. Please make every workstation have something that is unique to itself and has some kind of a complexity to the password itself. Now, each workstation should be locked or have a timeout mechanism after a period of inactivity, somewhere around 10, 20, maybe even up to 30 seconds, that places the computer into a password-enabled screensaver state, kind of what we call the computer locks itself, after a period of inactivity, whereas the username and password must be re-entered into the computer to allow access again. This is actually pretty big, not only in the HMS community, but pretty much security standards for software across the country. This will prevent users from, when you're into the computer and working on it, and then you're done with it and you just kind of walk away, you forget to log off or anything like that. That would, without this mechanism, it basically leaves the computer wide open so that anybody that kind of passes by has immediate access to any of the data, not only in the HMIS software, but on the computer itself. Almost all computers have built-in safeguards and features that can be pretty easily enabled password-based screensavers after a short period of inactivity. And this small little step greatly increases your security. Now, finally, many workstations have also window applications such as Word, PDF documents, as well as email that could potentially contain PPI and also needs to be secured accordingly. A worker could be sending an email about a client to an outside agency resource or medical clinic, and this information needs to be guarded as well as any information that even contains a client name. Say you're just making an appointment for, Bill Smith, just because it includes his name, that does fall under the heading of, or under the category of personal protected information. So all CHOs should ensure proper steps are taken to address individual access to such programs and electronic documentation, not just the computer itself. So you want to be aware of those as well. One of the most popular avenues to take is, well, multiple persons probably use the same workstation. If you have individual user access, so each person has their own login, then the system can be set up with individual, Word document folders and email for each individual person that uses that computer. Okay, this is the CHO Software Application Security section. This is actually all about the HMIS system, our PA HMIS system software and access to it. Each CHO user must have an individual username and password that is used to log on and use the PA HMIS system. When registering with the system or maintaining access with the system, each individual CHO user must have a unique username and password. And all the passwords that are used, if you're able to register and use, they all do meet complexity requirements. Now, written information specifically pertaining to user access, this is probably a big one, may not be stored or displayed in any publicly accessible location. Please do not keep your username and password in a publicly accessible area. Like, don't get your username and password for PA HMIS and just, put it on a Post-it note and kind of stick it to your computer screen. While that may seem simple and everything, that is a big no-no. Same thing as, putting a little scrap of paper and just throwing it, randomly in your desk drawer. That's a no-no as well. This makes it very easy for other individuals to take your user access and log into the system as yourself. Try using other methods like keeping the information on your person. Maybe keep the scrap of paper, but keep it in your own wallet or in your own purse or somewhere secure. You can even have it stored somewhere on your personal computer in a hard-to-find location. Maybe bury, have a little text file with your username and password, but bury it 4 or 5 folders down somewhere in a random location on your computer, and that's okay. Also, as long as your Outlook is secured, a lot of people create their own contacts, HMIS contact, and put the username and log on and password there. So at least it's secure behind your Windows and Outlook information. It's just not lying around accessible to the public. Now also, PA HMIS users must not provide their user access to any other member of their CHO, and shared user access is strictly prohibited within the participation agreement and the system user agreement. Basically, under no circumstances should any HMIS user give your personal username and password to any other CHO users. This includes supervisor or management teams as well. The sharing of usernames is explicitly forbidden, as each individual user must have their own registration and they must sign their own system user agreement, as well as they must be authorized through the user authorization forms, basically allowed into the PA HMIS system individually, and we track that paperwork as well. Also, the HMIS system specifically logs each action in the system by the actual user ID. So if multiple people are using the same user ID and there a problem or an audit comes up, it's hard to track who specifically did what if there's sharing of IDs around there. This will cause complications, especially if questions arise. So in addition to asking for another user's system access, it also puts people in an uncomfortable position of having, doing something they know they shouldn't do. So for the sake of not sharing username and password, please don't ask. It follows the rules and leaves people out of uncomfortable situations. Okay, the final one is the CHO hard copy security, and this kind of relates, directly to the paper files and paper information that must be kept alongside of the electronic HMIS system. A CHO must secure any paper or hard copy containing personal protected information that is either generated by or for the HMIS system, but not limited to reports, data entry forms, and signed consent forms. Now, any hard copy forms used by the CHO or agency, such as the client intake, eligibility determination, services provided forms, even just general registration forms, must be kept in secure locations and can only be accessible to authorized agency personnel at all times. It's very important. Now, along with the paper forms that you keep in their own files and everything, this also, please remember, this also includes and pertains to any information that is provided by the HMIS system as well. There are many ways to get data out of the system that includes system reports, such as things like, the active data quality, the missing data reports, any kind of APR client details reports, a number of service reports. They all include, some household information, names, ages, gender, a whole bunch of different information that falls under this PPI, so you need to make sure that you take care of printing out these reports. Now, not only reports, it also includes things such as page prints as well as the new client data sheet that we put in, because you can easily print out that client data sheet, as well as you can go to individual pages within the HMIS system and print them out individually. All that falls under these hard copy security, as they do contain PPI. So you need to be very careful when you're printing out that information or sending it to a printer. You need to make sure you don't leave that lying around so anybody walking over can just pick it up and walk out. You need to make sure that's kept, you know, securely in either a locked desk drawer or within an office itself that doesn't allow any outside access. Now, also a CHO must supervise at all times any paper or any other hard copy generated from or for the HMIS in a public area. Now, we also highly recommend keeping your files in a securely locked room, you know, a specific, whether it's an agency manager's office or a specific, you know, file room or closet on its own that can be closed and locked when all staff have left for the night or the weekend. So in case someone gets in after hours, it's still got another level of security that they need to get through. All right, a couple other additional CHO security pertaining to physical access. You should escort all visitors and clients to ensure that they do not access staff areas, record storage areas, record storage areas, or other areas potentially containing client information. And the CHO will request persons not recognized as staff, visitors, and clients to identify themselves. So just be aware. Also implement security measures to prevent unauthorized use of photocopiers, printers, and fax machines by visitors and other unauthorized persons. Basically, what you want to do is create an atmosphere where the CHO staff feels comfortable and obligated to report security breaches and misuse of the HMIS system. All CHOs should encourage clients to report any breaches of confidentiality that they observe at the CHO by other agency staff members. So just basically, we want you to create an atmosphere that everybody understands. So if they see someone at a photocopier and they're not sure who it is, go ask them, or ask someone, who's that person and why are they copying information? It just makes the whole environment a lot safer if everybody's got their eye on security. Okay, a couple quick conclusions. In conclusion, privacy is in everyone's hands, and it is all for the responsibility to ensure clients' personal protected information remains confidential, relevant, and of course is only in front of authorized personnel, whether that be internal agency staff or external partner agencies. Please ensure all CHOs review their privacy policies, privacy notices and policies with staff on a regular basis. This includes going over security strategies to keep client data, whether it's electronic or hard copy, safe. The security standards presented for CHOs are difficult to implement and can significantly lower the chance of unauthorized access occurring. If you're not familiar with some of the specific terms laid out in the training, please present them and pass along to your organization's IT personnel. They should not have any issues instituting some of these security, password, screensaver, lockout issues with your computers. Hopefully most, if not all, are already in place. Now a couple resources. There are 3 resources for kind of continued education as well as going a little bit in depth. What we explained here are all just the baseline requirements for privacy and security. It's the bare minimum that must be done. HUD has also laid out a whole bunch of additional security measures that feel free to look at and everything, because as things go along, it's funny how, additional things make their way to become mandatory eventually as years go along. So if you understand that additional stuff and get a jump on it, you'll be ahead for the future. But these are 3 resources found on the HMIS.info website and provide for more in-depth information. There's the security standards, privacy standards, as well as some privacy requirements in the final notice and some basic links here. Because actually of these 3 links here, most of the information in today's class was taken directly from these resources. Because what I actually found is if you go to HMIS.info and go to the search screen and just do, HMIS security or HMIS privacy searches, you can find a ton of resources on this information, as well as additional information to help you put together your privacy notices and privacy postings as well. Okay, that concludes today's PA HMIS Privacy and Security